Hey guys, just a quick guide on how to set yourself up as an elemental shaman for Kurog Grimtotem in the Vault of the Incarnates raid on all difficulties. This fight does not favor elemental shaman's damage profile in the least, but with that being said, we're going to talk about how we can best optimize our damage so we can help out our raid as much as possible. So we'll talk about LFR through heroic first, and then we'll talk about mythic at the end because it is slightly different. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into the talents for heroic and under. So for LFR, normal, and heroic, I'd highly suggest something like a pure single target build like you see here on the right. I actually have a video on my channel going over how this plays out moment to moment, and I actually use Kurog as an example in that video. So feel free to go check that out if you want to see how this build actually plays, but this is what I would suggest for Kurog on LFR through heroic. For your class tree, you just want your standard talents. Make sure that you're taking things like Astral Guidance and your Spirit Walker's Grace, but basically everything here is up to you. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and just jump into the fight itself on heroic. Alright, so let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Remember, with this build, we want to be using as many lava bursts as we can, but making sure we're not overcapping our resources, so spending elemental blast when we're about to cap on Maelstrom. If you don't have lava bursts to press and you can't use elemental blast yet, then we're going to be using our empowered frost shocks from our Ice Fury, and if we don't have that, then we'll be using our lightning bolt. It does happen, as you can see right now, so it really just depends on RNG and how many lava surge procs that we get. So with that being said, with this first part of the boss, make sure you're staring at the boss's feet so you can see where these frost orbs are coming out, so we can just sidestep and dodge them. Going ahead and jumping into the fire phase, we want to stand in a nice group with our ranged, so that when the magma burst comes out, which is the big circle of flame that stays on the ground comes out, we can just take a nice sidestep over to the right and just continue on normally. With this Searing Carnage, this is where we're going to be using our Spirit Walker's Grace, so you go ahead and activate that, and now we can continue to do our normal single target rotation without having to worry about movement messing up those casts. So that's the first instance where using Spirit Walker's Grace is really useful. Going into the intermission, we're going to be focusing on the Frozen Destroyer first, and then the Fire Fiend second. So if you have your Primordial Wave up in any time, especially with 4 targets like this, I can already have one Flame Shock out here, one on this one on Kurog, and then one on the Fiend. And then I can get 4 Lava Bursts out at a time. One thing I should have done here is I should have used my Elemental Blast first. I didn't. So big mistake on my part, wasting a lot of those resources. Something that you can do better there. And then you're just going to be focusing on just the Destroyer. You don't need to worry about Chain Lightning. You don't have to worry about Earthquake. It's just Lava Bursts and then getting back to Elemental Blast. Now, one thing that you can see me do here is I put a Flame Shock on this Hellion. It would have been better, and you can't really see it because he's off screen right now. It's better to keep a Flame Shock active on the boss rather than putting it on these Hellions, especially if your group is killing them super quickly like mine was. Because that way you're at least getting a Lava Surge proc, an additional chance to get a Lava Surge proc by having one up on Kurog. So even though he's not taking a whole lot of damage from that Flame Shock, he is going to be helping you generate more Lava Surges that way, which means more Lava Bursts, which means more Elemental Blasts over the course of this phase. So just keep that in mind. Don't worry too much about the Hellions if they're dying super quickly like they are for here in this kill. So in this final phase here, and I do say final phase on this Earth phase because you don't want to ever get into the Lightning phase. It's just too much to worry about, and I honestly couldn't tell you what happens there. So you really just want to focus about killing Kurog in the Earth phase because it's much easier to deal with. That much I do know. So again, you're just going to be focusing on doing as much damage as you can when the enveloping eruption comes out, or the erupting bedrock right here. You just want to move up to the edge of it, like right here where Moon is, and then take one step forward, and now you can just continue doing damage to the boss. Very simple movement, don't have to do anything crazy. When the ads come out, which are right here, again, we're in a pure single target build, so there's not a whole lot we can do. But as you notice that my Primordial Wave has just come off cooldown, so in this situation what you can do is throw out one Flame Shock and then one Primordial Wave, and then go back to the boss, and then kind of ignore the rest. Again, in a normal group, they're just going to die so quickly that we won't be able to get any more value out of it than that. It won't, again, still won't be worth putting down an Earthquake unless you think they're going to actually be able to live through the entire duration of Earthquake. So outside of that, that's pretty much it. Again, very straightforward, very single target. Make sure that we're getting our Flame Shocks out on those big ads, and making sure we're getting keeping a Flame Shock on Kurog at all time. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into to Mythic, and we'll talk about those talents first there as well. All right, so for Mythic, there's a few more things to consider. The first thing I'd highly suggest doing is moving this point out of Elemental Equilibrium and putting it into Liquid Magma Totem. There are a lot more adds, and spreading those Flame Shocks will not only give us more damage on the adds, but will also help us generate more Lava Surge procs so we can do more single target or priority damage to what we actually need to be killing. So that's the main thing that I'd highly suggest changing. You can use Windspeaker's Lava Resurgence or Skybreaker's Fiery Demise. I use Skybreaker's Fiery Demise, but if I could go back in time and redo it, I'd have probably used Windspeaker's Lava Resurgence. You probably are going to get more damage overall for Skybreakers, but you might end up getting a little bit more priority damage with your WLR instead. So that's really up to you. Both of these work fairly well for this fight, and it's more of a to taste. Most people right now seem to be using Skybreakers, but again, for progression, if it's your first time, focusing in on that single target damage with WLR is something that I'd suggest. On the class side of things, you'll need to adjust your tree to make sure that you can come down here and grab your Totemic Recall so you can get that extra charge of Liquid Magma Totem. It's not really a charge, you still have to use the ability, but you can get a second Liquid Magma Totem out fairly quickly, which will be important for this fight. Which does mean that you'll have to change up some of your talents over here in order to accommodate that, because you'll still want to make sure that you're getting Ancestral Guidance. So what I did here is I took some points out of like Thunderous Paws, and I took 1 point out of Nature's Guardian. You can move some other things around as well, but I think this is what plays out the best, so you can use this as well for this fight. So with that being said, that's all the consideration on the class side of things, and we'll go ahead and jump into the fight on Mythic now. Alright, so we'll be using the standard Mythic strat for this, and I will be focusing just like in Heroic on single target and spreading those Flame Shocks to get even more Lava Surges to do even more single target damage. So going ahead and jumping into this, it's going to be a normal pull, except I'm not going to use my Primordial Wave or the Liquid Magma Totem. I'm going to wait for the ad to come out before I do that. As soon as the ad comes out, I'm going to hit it with Primordial Wave and then go back onto the boss and then just focus on the boss. I'm going to go ahead and use my Spirit Walker's Grace early here because I don't want my Lust window to be hurt by having to move, so I'm just going to go ahead and put that on cooldown, and then as soon as I get a free GCD, I'm going to put down my Liquid Magma Totem, reset it, and then put down another Liquid Magma Totem. And we want to do this fairly early on because it is affected by haste, so we want to be able to do that sometime in our Lust window. Just go ahead and get both of those things on cooldown, and then go right back into the boss. And outside of that, we're just going to be paying attention to mechanics and trying to do as much damage to Kurog as possible. Anytime that we can just focus on Kurog, you should really be doing it because we want his health to be as low as possible so that we go into that last phase, we can be finishing the fight as quickly as we can. So with that being said, that's pretty much it for the first phase. As we go into the first intermission, what we're going to be doing is focusing on that lightning ad as it comes out, and then onto the fire ad. So I'll go ahead and get a flame shock out there. As soon as it's off cooldown, I'll put a flame shock onto the fire fiend as well, and then go back to focusing on the lightning ad from there. As soon as my Liquid Magma Totem comes up, I'm going to put one down right on this grouping just to go ahead and refresh everything. Maybe put one on one of these Hellions, put a Flame Shock back on the boss because we want to keep that one going as well too. And then again, back focusing on the Lightning ad. And as often as you can, try to just be focusing on that one, keeping those Flame Shocks active. If you can, try to get them on any of the Hellions that aren't going to just get immediately eviscerated by the melee, but it's really not a big priority. If that's one too many steps, just focus on the lightning ad, the fire ad, and Kurog, and then you can kind of skip everything else. But if you think a Hellion's going to live for at least a couple seconds of the flame shock, you can definitely put one on one of those as well, but it's just not nearly as important. So after we kill the Blazing Fiend, we'll go into the next phase here, where we're going to be focusing again on just trying to get as much damage onto Kurog as we can. As this ad comes up, I'll be using my Primordial Wave. Because he's coming up so quickly, that's the only time I'd consider like holding Primordial Wave. So he's coming out, and then we go right back onto the boss. So during this phase, especially during this Erupting Bedrock, this is where you can use your Ancestral Guidance. Usually on one of the later ones. The earlier ones don't do nearly as much damage, so just keep that in the back of your mind. That's when you can be using it. When the ads come out, this is where it'll be holding Liquid Magma Totem for coming up into this phase. So as these ads come up, I'll wait for them to get pulled in. I'll drop my Liquid Magma Totem, try to hit at least 3. And if I miss any, I'll put a Flame Shock on one, a Primordial Wave on another one, and then go back to the boss. And then again, just like in Heroic, I'm not going to worry about them. kind of think of them as your batteries to be gaining more lava surge procs, as many as you can. So you don't have to focus on them. Don't worry about your earthquake or anything like that. Just go right back to focusing on the boss. What you can do here is go ahead and immediately reset your liquid magma totem. I kind of wait a little bit too long because I'm focusing on trying to not damage my damage by doing a GCD that doesn't do any damage on its own. So I'm kind of getting rid of as many lava bursts as I can first, and now I'll go ahead and reset it right before these ads come out. Try to reset it a little bit sooner than that, just so you can get that on cooldown. But you'll notice I didn't have my primordial wave on off cooldown yet. You can kind of hold it for that if you want. I just don't like waiting for it because, again, you're still trying to do as much damage to Kurog as you possibly can. But if you're looking to get even more damage out on these guys and get that huge burst of Maelstrom, you can definitely hold it for that as well. I just didn't there. So I dot everything out, go back to Kurog, and then as soon as my primordial wave is off cooldown, I'll use it. Even though it's only hitting 3 targets, it is still better than nothing at all. So getting it out there and then going right back to the boss. In the next intermission, same as the previous one, focusing on whichever one your raid is prioritizing. In this case, it's the Frozen Destroyer, focusing on that, and then keeping our Flame Shocks. You can just see it barely over here. I've got a Flame Shock over here, and then on these 2 primary ads as well. And basically, you can hold your Liquid Magma Totem for any time that the ad waves come out in this phase, because we don't really need it anymore. It's just to dot everything up for all of those all of the additional ads that come up from the rock ad here. So as the ads come out, which will be happening in just a second here, as you can see, there they are. There's 4 of them. We're going to be dropping our Liquid Magma Totem on that group as well. So we'll drop the Liquid Magma Totem. I was a little bit behind here because I get this DRE proc. I should have been able to use my Primordial Wave, but was just a little bit slow doing it. So unfortunately, they die before I get a chance to actually do it. But that's what you can be doing. Same thing that you were doing in the Earth phase beforehand. So with that being said, we'll finish killing this Crusher. And then it is on to the last phase. And in the last phase, we're just going to be focusing on Grimtotem, but we will put that Frost Shock on the Dominator as well. So at this point, as long as you keep both Flame Shocks going, you're just going to be focusing Grimtotem until the boss dies. This is another good place. As the longer this goes on, it'll be better and better to use your Ancestral Guidance. So if you can hold that, if things are starting to go wrong, you can definitely do that as well and use that later in this phase. Pro tip for these frost orbs, be staring at the boss's feet. Don't be staring down here if you have a weak aura string for your class. Try to keep your eyes up here so you can see where they're coming out and adjust beforehand instead of waiting until they get right in front of you to move. So be staring at the feet of the ad as well as the boss so that you can see where the orbs are going to be coming out from. You can obviously use your Liquid Magma Totem in this phase as well. If you have nothing else to cast, if you don't have another Lava Burst to cast, you can throw that out as well. But other than that, that's pretty much it. Like I said, this is a great place to use AG, which is what I'll use in just a second here as people are starting to drop off. But other than that, that's pretty much it. That's the whole fight. I hope this was helpful. Yes, this is a very bad fight for Elemental. It is definitely one of its worst ones. But if you do go and you look on your logs at the end, you will actually be able to do a good amount of single target damage to the boss this way. So you can kind of like argue for your raid leader that, hey, at least I do a lot of good single target damage to the boss. I am keeping up in that regard. I'm just not doing that much damage, you know, to the stuff that doesn't matter nearly as much, to the ads and things like that. So your damage is still fairly good. It just looks a lot worse when you look at it in a Warcraft log without any context. But you are able to do a good amount of damage to the boss. So if you're looking to try to get in on a mythic kill of Kurog, make sure that you're saying that. Make sure you're saying, hey, my boss damage is actually fairly good. It's not going to be as good as Warlocks or Mages right now, but it still can be fairly competitive. So hopefully this was helpful. If you did find it helpful, give it a thumbs up. Give me a comment if you have any questions. I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/ridmark, so feel free to give me a follow there. But other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.